Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. And guys, we have a video to talk about here. And yes, we're going back to Western Canada, specifically Alberta. And we're not taking a look at the Flames today. That was last week. We're looking at the Edmonton Oilers today. And the Oilers, according to Alan Mitchell of The Athletic, a great article, so make sure to check that out, guys. There is some stuff going on in Edmonton. Now, we knew a couple months back, what am I saying? A couple months ago, we heard some stuff out of recent reports and stuff that the Carolina Hurricanes and the Edmonton Oilers had already committed themselves to saying, yeah, we're going for it this year. Like, we like how things have gone through the first quarter of the season, and we're going to start exploring how to add to our team. Now, especially in Edmonton. Both of these teams have kind of diverged recently. Edmonton is on this epic losing streak. They've obviously gotten hit with COVID, and things have not gone well for the Oilers. Mike Smith got injured. That was a huge loss for them. So there's a lot of stuff going on in Edmonton. Meanwhile, Carolina has seemed a little bit more stable, and that may either force the Oilers to pull back and say, no, we're not going to make that move now, or we're going to see a move that maybe Ken Holland doesn't want to make right now, but because he's a little bit desperate and the team's not playing well, he's kind of forcing his hand, and he has to make the trade that he's kind of not wanting to make. So this is from Alan Mitchell of The Athletic. Edmonton Oilers General Manager Ken Holland may want to add some pieces before the March 21st trade deadline, but they have limited salary cap space. That's a key point here. Following that up, the Oilers have 5 players currently on the long-term injured reserve, which I have that list for you guys here, but we'll go over them real quick. We got defenseman Oscar Klefbom. He may never play in the NHL again after his shoulder issues. Josh Archibald, there are some questions about his COVID situation. He didn't get vaccinated, and I think the Oilers are keeping him off the Schneid, which unfortunately is not really, again, that could go into a different topic, but whatever, that was the Oilers' decision to leave him down there. Alex Stalock, the goaltender, and Mike Smith. So both goaltenders, great. Your backup and your starter, gone. Right? Which means you have Mikko Koskinen and Stuart Skinner, which you want to do everything to avoid that happening. And it still happened anyway. And you also have defenseman Chris Russell. Probably not going to see him anytime soon. And they haven't been able to bank salary cap space. Any move would have to be money in and money out, which basically means if they're moving a contract in, $5 million, they have to move back $5 million out. That's not necessarily going to be easy to do with the way the Oilers are built. So that is something we'll keep an eye on. The Oilers don't have a 2022 second, third, and fourth round picks. Philip Broberg is their best trade asset along with their first round pick. Those assets would be brought up in any Jakob Chychrun or Marc-Andre Fleury trade talks. Other potential trade candidates could include Mikko Koskinen, Zach Kassian, and Kyle Turris. Has Dmitry Samorukov and Marcus Niemelainen's progress made Philip Broberg expendable? So, we're going to go over all of that. So, the first thing, we're going to go over the draft picks here, and I have this little template for you guys. So, basically, the draft picks that are written in white basically means that those are the picks that they have. So, they have all of their first 4 draft picks in the 2023 draft, but this draft in 2022, they don't have their third and fourth round picks. They also don't have their second, which is, at this point, it depends on if they make the playoffs, if they get to the second round, and Duncan Keith is at least top 4 on the team in time on ice minutes, then that pick will get sent to the Blackhawks. So it's a very weird, what is that called? Conditional pick, but it's there. That is a conditional pick. So the Oilers still may keep that second. That is something to kind of keep an eye on. That's why it's got the star and is written in gold, because that is a totally different situation than just trading away the draft pick like the third and fourth round picks. Moving along to the Philip Broberg stuff, I would not trade Philip Broberg. Maybe for Jakob Chychrun. But the problem is, especially when you're the Oilers, right? it's a hard thing because Broberg is what, 19, 20, maybe 21? He's still very young. And we know defensemen take a while to develop. You look at a perfect example, a Swedish defenseman, Victor Hedman. It took him a couple years. He was a former second overall pick. And it took him a couple years. And now look where he's at now in Tampa, right? Multiple cup rings, a couple Norris candidate finalists and wins. So he's a pretty damn good defenseman. I wouldn't push out Philip Broberg just yet. Now, especially not for Marc-Andre Fleury. And that's not a slight against Marc-Andre Fleury, but I think we all understand, the circumstance there. You're not trading Broberg for Fleury. That's not happening. That's more if they were to trade Chychrun, I think. That's really what that's about. And there will be some more debate about that, because if you have a 19 or 20-year-old defenseman in Broberg, you get the more developed guy in Jakob Chychrun, who could be very similar, if not the exact same player. Long term, you're just buying 3 more years of development in Chychrun, but it's going to come at a very heavy price. It may cost you Broberg, it may cost you a first, it may cost you even a first or a second next year, and a prospect like Samorukov or Niemelainen as well on top of that. That's a lot to ask for. So if I'm the Oilers, and again, that's, I think, how much is Chychrun making? $4.5 million or something like that? Yeah, that's a great contract. That's still $4.5 million. You have to move out of the organization. That's Kyle Turris. That's Cassian. That's Koskinen. You have to move those contracts out. So now you're going to have to give up more assets to load those deals to the Coyotes. If they're going to take on Koskinen or Cassian or Turris, you better be giving them something in return. And that's more prospects and draft picks. Do the Oilers want to do that? It just seems like more of a mess than it's worth. And I think that's something that could be said. Now, here's the interesting thing. Has Dmitry Samorukov and Marcus Niemelainen taken away a spot from Broberg on the defense? I think that's absolute horse. Why would the Oilers? That is not. No. That's apples and oranges. You're comparing Broberg to, and this is no discredit to Samorukov or Niemelainen. They are both former first and second round draft picks, respectively. But Philip Broberg is a different level. And you watch Philip Broberg in his games in World Juniors and stuff like that, I wouldn't be pushing out Philip Broberg at this point for any reason. I think he's going to be a very talented, at the very least, top 4 defenseman. I wouldn't trade that away. Now, again, that's the other factor here. Because what if the Oilers do trade Broberg? He ends up not being that good in Arizona. Again, you're selling that potential with Broberg. You know what you have in Jakob Chychrun, but it's also going to come at a super heavy and lucrative price. Is it worth it? Because you look at their defense right now, you have Darnell Nurse and Tyson Barrie, your top pair. That's actually not bad. And then you start to get to the second and third pair, and that's where the concerns come up. You have William Legason and Cody Ceci as your second pair. I have my thoughts on Cody Ceci. I thought that was a bad move from the start. Slater Cuckoo and Evan Bouchard on your third pair. Not liking that too much either. And then you look at some of the injuries. I mean, it's all over the place. You're missing Duncan Keith out. He's out, which I believe is COVID. Chris Russell and Oscar Klefbom. Those are 3 defensemen right there. You could argue our top 4 defensemen. Those are some key losses for the Oilers. On the forward side of things, we already know about Archibald. That was the beginning of the year. Ryan McLeod, a younger guy, but still, I mean, there was some hope with him as a bottom 6 center. And Zach Hyman, who was the big guy they just added. Now, he's day-to-day with his injury, which is good. But then you have the 2 goalies out on top of that. Your starter and your backup at the beginning of the season in Mike Smith and Alex Stalock. So you talk about the needs for the Oilers. It's not just adding a defenseman. They need a defenseman. They need a goalie. They may not mind adding another winger into the middle 6. That's why I brought up Jake DeBrusk. Like, they could be looking at a guy like Phil Kessel, Jake DeBrusk for their forward need. They could be looking at a guy like Jakob Chychrun on the blue line, and they could be looking at a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury in between the pipes. But that's going to come with a lot of trading draft picks and prospects. What are the Oilers willing to give up? And that's the question that maybe you don't want to, you kind of fear answering, but that's kind of the reality. And the fact that the Oilers have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl right now in the spot where they are at, in basically early 20s still, mid-20s, they are still not in their prime yet, which is just insane to think. But there is a timetable on that. So again, I think the Oilers realize that, and that's why they would be, another 2 or 3 years of waiting for Broberg just might not be, it might not be feasible. They truly might not have the time to do that. And I'm trying to find the Oilers contracts here real quick. What do we got? So they have no cap space, and you have really 4 years. You have the next 4 years to get this thing off the ground, because that is the end of Leon Draisaitl's contract, and in 5 years from now is Connor McDavid's deal. And that will be the 26-27 season. We will see a new CBA just in time for Draisaitl's next contract, a year after McDavid's. That's going to be a very scary market for the Oilers when they have to repay both of those guys. That might get ugly. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think of the Oilers? Because I truly think Jakob Chychrun, as good of a player as he is, I don't think it makes sense for the Oilers to make that move. They're buying years of McDavid and Draisaitl in terms of getting a defenseman that's ready right now, and it's like the ready-made Build-A-Bear, but there is fallback to that because you're giving up prospects and depth that in 2 or 3 years from now, when hopefully the Oilers are going on deep playoff runs and winning Stanley Cups, that they'll have those rookies that they've been drafting to fill the void. The problem is you traded all those draft picks away. So there is that concern there. So let me know what you think, Oilers fans, because I think there's a lot of interest around this whole thing. So I want to see what you guys think of that down below. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time.